able to right now. That was cool. I can't believe I did that. What the heck? I'm not able to right now. That was cool.
Beneath the freezing rain of Chicago, Charlie Vane, the city's most feared underworld kingpin, sat in his armored SUV, watching a failure unfold. His 6-year-old daughter, mute for 2 years, was screaming in the park while her expensive nanny texted on a bench. But then a figure emerged from the shadows. A girl in rags, shivering, knelt beside the child. Charlie reached for his gun, expecting a kidnapping. Instead, he saw his daughter stop crying. He saw her smile. What the homeless girl did next didn't just save a child, it brought a Mafia empire to its knees. The engine of the blacked-out Cadillac Escalade hummed a low, predatory note, vibrating against the soles of Charlie Vane's Italian leather shoes. He didn't look like a father waiting for his child. He looked like a predator, waiting to ambush prey. His knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. His eyes fixed on the private park across the street. "Boss, we need to leave his driver, a hulking man named Bruno," grunted from the front seat. "The meeting with the Korsakov syndicate is in 20 minutes. You know how impatient the Russians get." "Wait," Charlie commanded, his voice like grinding gravel. He wasn't watching for enemies. He was watching his daughter, Bella. At 6 years old, Bella was the heir to the Vane crime family, a legacy of blood and billions. Yet she looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together wrong. Since the car bomb that took her mother, Clara, 2 years ago, Bella hadn't spoken a single word. Not a whisper. She was trapped in a silent scream that never ended. Currently, she was sitting on a wet swing in the private park of the Obsidian Heights district, her little legs dangling. It was freezing, a biting November afternoon in Chicago. But her nanny, a woman Charlie, paid 6 figures a year, was sitting on a bench 20 yards away, aggressively typing on her phone, ignoring the fact that Bella's coat was unzipped. "Useless," Charlie hissed. He reached for the door handle. He was going to fire the woman right there on the pavement. But then movement in his peripheral vision made him freeze. A figure emerged from the thicket of decorative bushes near the playground. It was a young woman, though it was hard to tell her age under the layers of grime and oversized mismatched clothes. She wore a man's grey hoodie that was 3 sizes too big and a beanie that had seen better days. She was homeless, one of the invisible ghosts of the city Charlie usually ignored. Charlie's hand instinctively went to the Sig Sauer tucked inside his blazer. If this vagrant touched his daughter, he would end her before she took a second breath. The girl didn't grab Bella. She didn't beg for money. She knelt. Charlie watched, mesmerized and tense, as the homeless girl lowered herself into the mud right in front of the swing. She was holding something, a book. No, it was a piece of cardboard. Bella, who usually flinched at strangers, didn't pull away. She stared at the girl. The homeless girl began to move her hands. She wasn't speaking. She was using sign language, but it was accompanied by exaggerated theatrical facial expressions. She pointed to the grey sky, then made a motion of rain falling, then tapped her own nose and crossed her eyes. Bella blinked. Then a miracle happened. Bella's lips twitched. A small, rusty sound escaped her throat. A giggle. Charlie felt the air leave his lungs. He hadn't heard that sound in 730 days. Bruno Charlie whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Give me the audio." Bruno tapped the console. The parabolic microphone mounted on the SUV's exterior swiveled toward the park. The audio crackled through the car speakers, cutting through the static of the rain. And that's why the cloud was crying. The homeless girl's voice came through. It was hoarse, raspy from the cold, but incredibly melodic. It had a warmth that defied the freezing temperature. But look, Princess, even clouds run out of tears eventually. The girl reached into the pocket of her oversized hoodie and pulled out a flower, a crumpled, half-dead dandelion she must have found struggling in the frost. She tucked it behind Bella's ear. "You're a warrior, you know that," the girl whispered. "I can see it in your eyes. You're fighting dragons nobody else can see. I fight them too." Bella reached out her small, gloved hand and touched the girl's dirty cheek. Charlie's heart hammered against his ribs. He had hired the best child psychologists in Switzerland. He had flown in specialists from Vienna. None of them had gotten a reaction. This girl, who looked like she hadn't eaten a warm meal in weeks, had done it in 3 minutes. Then the moment shattered. The nanny finally looked up from her phone. Seeing the homeless girl near Bella, she shrieked, "Get away from her! You filthy animal!" The nanny rushed forward, her high heels clicking on the pavement. She grabbed the homeless girl by the shoulder and shoved her hard. The girl, weak and off balance, toppled backward into the mud. She looked sad," the girl stammered, raising her hands defensively. "Don't you speak to her. Do you know who her father is?" The nanny loomed over her face, twisted in disgust. "I'm calling the police." Bella started to scream. It was a silent, open-mouthed wail of panic. She reached for the homeless girl, tears instantly streaming down her face. Charlie didn't think. He reacted. He threw the car door open and stormed across the street, ignoring the traffic that screeched to a halt. Bruno was right on his heels, umbrella in hand, but Charlie didn't care about the rain. The nanny turned, seeing the imposing figure of Charlie Vane stalking toward her. Her face went pale. "Mr. Vane. Thank God. This junkie was harassing Bella." Charlie didn't even look at the nanny. He walked past her, his expensive coat billowing, and stopped in front of the girl in the mud. She looked up at him terrified. She had striking eyes, an unusual shade of violet blue, stark against her dirt-smudged pale skin. She scrambled backward, expecting a blow. "Please," she rasped. "I didn't take anything. I just saw her crying." Charlie looked at Bella. His daughter had scrambled off the swing and was now clinging to the homeless girl's muddy sleeve, shaking her head at her father, pleading with her eyes. Charlie turned his cold steel gaze to the nanny. "You're fired," the nanny gasped. "What?" "But, sir, I was protecting." "You were ignoring her," Charlie said, his voice deadly quiet. "Bruno. Get her out of my sight before I forget that I'm a civilized man." Bruno nodded, gripping the nanny's arm and dragging the protesting woman away. Charlie turned back to the girl on the ground. He extended a hand. It was a hand that had signed death warrants, a hand that controlled the shipping lanes of the East Coast. "Stand up," he commanded. The girl hesitated, eyeing his hand like it was a trap. Slowly she reached out. Her hand was small, rough, and freezing cold. He pulled her up effortlessly. She barely weighed anything. "What is your name?" Charlie asked. "Ivy," she whispered. "Ivy Sullivan. Ivy Sullivan." Charlie repeated, testing the name. "You got my daughter to smile." How Ivy hugged herself, trying to hide the tremors racking her body. I used to be a teacher. Before. Everything." She wasn't responding to sound, so I used visuals. "She's not just mute, Mr. Vane. She's overstimulated. She's blocking out the world because it hurts too much." Charlie stared at her. The doctors had called it selective mutism due to trauma. They had prescribed pills. This girl spoke about it like she felt it. "You're coming with me," Charlie stated. Ivy's eyes widened. "What no?" "Look, mister, I don't want any trouble. You have two choices, Ivy." Charlie interrupted, stepping closer. The air around him felt heavy, dangerous. "Choice. A. You walk away back to whatever alley you sleep in and freeze to death tonight when the temperature drops. Choice B. You get in that car. You come to my home and you finish the conversation you started with my daughter." Ivy looked at the warm, massive SUV. She looked at Bella, who was holding Charlie's pant leg, but staring at Ivy with wide, hopeful eyes. Then she looked down at her own torn sneakers, soaked through with icy water. "I'm not a charity case," Ivy said, her chin lifting slightly. There was pride there, buried under the grime. "I don't do charity," Charlie countered smoothly. "I do business. I'm offering you a job. 1 week. If she smiles again, I pay you $10,000. If she speaks, I pay you $100. Ivy's jaw dropped. "You're insane. I'm a father," Charlie said, his voice softening just a fraction enough to show the desperation beneath the armor. "Please." That one word broke her. Ivy nodded slowly. Charlie scooped Bella up in one arm and ushered Ivy toward the car with the other. As she slid into the heated leather interior, the scent of expensive cologne and old money hitting her, Ivy Sullivan realized she hadn't just stepped into a car. She had stepped into the lion's den. But as the heavy door thudded shut, sealing them off from the rain, Charlie Vane watched her through the rearview mirror. He noticed the bruise fading on her wrist, a mark that looked suspiciously like a handprint. She's running from someone, Charlie thought, his eyes narrowing. Well, whoever they are, they'll have to go through me now. The drive to the Vane estate was silent, but the tension in the air was loud enough to deafen. Ivy sat on the edge of the plush leather seat, trying not to let her muddy clothes touch the pristine beige interior. Bella sat next to her, not touching her, but close enough that Ivy could feel the child's body heat. The estate was less of a house and more of a fortress. High stone walls topped with electrified fencing cameras, swiveling at every corner, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter. It was located in Barrington Hills, an area where the driveways were longer than most city blocks. When they arrived, the sheer scale of the foyer made Ivy dizzy. Marble floors that reflected the crystal chandelier, a double staircase that looked like it belonged in a movie, and the silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. "Bruno will show you to the guest wing," Charlie said, checking his watch. He had switched back to boss mode. "Get cleaned up. The staff will burn your clothes and provide new ones." "Burn them," Ivy protested. I have a photo in my pocket. My locket." Charlie paused on the first step. He turned, looking at her. "Keep the locket. Burn the rest. You represent the Vane family now, Ivy." "We don't wear rags." He walked away without another word. An hour later, Ivy stood in front of a mirror she didn't recognize. She had scrubbed the grime off her skin, revealing a pale, gaunt face with high cheekbones and those startling violet eyes. The maid had given her a simple grey wool dress that fit surprisingly well. She looked human again, but she felt like an imposter. She touched the locket around her neck, a silver oval containing a picture of her younger brother, Leo. "I'm doing this for you, Leo," she thought. $10,000. That's enough to get us out of debt. Enough to stop running. She found Bella in the nursery, a room filled with toys that looked untouched. Bella was sitting on the floor, staring at a blank wall. Ivy sat down next to her. She didn't force the child to play. Instead, she grabbed a sketch pad from the table. She began to draw not a masterpiece, but a funny caricature of the scary-looking guard outside the door, but with bunny ears. She slid the paper to Bella. Bella looked at it. Her lip quirked. She grabbed a crayon and added a carrot in the guard's hand. It was a start. Over the next 3 days, the Vane household shifted on its axis. The staff, usually terrified of making noise, watched in awe as Ivy turned the silent nursery into a chaotic fort of blankets and pillows. She didn't force Bella to speak. She communicated through drawings, through taps, through a made-up sign language they created together. Charlie watched it all via the security feed in his study. He was in the middle of a war. The Korsakoffs were encroaching on his shipping territory at the docks. His underboss, a snake named Victor Cray, was urging him to strike back with blood. "We need to send a message," Dom Victor said, pacing around Charlie's mahogany desk. Victor was handsome in a slick, oily way, always smiling with too many teeth. "Burn their warehouse. Tonight." "No." Charlie said, his eyes glued to the screen, where Ivy was currently wearing a colander on her head, pretending to be a knight for Bella. "We wait. They're baiting us." "Since when are you cautious?" Victor sneered, following Charlie's gaze to the screen. "Ah, the stray cat. You're distracted, Charlie. You brought a homeless girl into the house. Do you know how that looks to the families?" "It looks weak." Charlie stood up slowly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Careful, Victor. You're speaking about my daughter's caretaker. I'm speaking about a security risk." Victor slammed his hand on the desk. "Who is she, Ivy Sullivan?" "I ran a background check. Nothing came up. No social security, no address for the last 3 years. She's a ghost or a spy." Charlie looked at Victor. "She's not a spy. She's desperate. And she's the only one who has made Bella laugh in 2 years." "She's a liability," Victor muttered, adjusting his tie. "And liabilities get liquidated." "Touch her." Charlie said, his voice a low rumble, "and I will feed you to the pigs at your uncle's farm. Get out." Victor left, but the look in his eyes was venomous. That night, Charlie found Ivy in the kitchen. She was making a sandwich at 2 a.m. "Can't sleep?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Ivy jumped, nearly dropping the knife. "Jesus, do you always sneak up on people?" "In my line of work, heavy footsteps get you killed," Charlie said dryly. He walked over and poured himself a glass of water. He was wearing a black t-shirt, his tattoos visible on his muscular arms, scars and ink telling stories of violence. Ivy tried not to stare. "Bella had a nightmare. I stayed with her until she fell back asleep." "She has them every night," Charlie said, his face darkening. "She sees the explosion. She needs to talk about it." "Charlie," Ivy said. It was the first time she used his first name. "But she can't do that while she's terrified of you." Charlie froze. "Excuse me." "You love her." "I can see that." Ivy said, her voice shaking but determined. "But you're scary. You walk around like a loaded gun. She needs a father, not a bodyguard. When was the last time you hugged her? Not picked her up, but actually hugged her." Charlie's glass shattered in his hand. Ivy gasped, rushing forward to grab a towel. "Don't move, you'll cut yourself." She carefully picked the shards out of his bleeding palm. Charlie stared down at her. No one dared to criticize him. No one dared to touch him when he was angry. But this girl, this tiny thing he had plucked from the mud, was lecturing him while dressing his wound. "You have a sharp tongue, Ivy," he murmured. "It's the teacher in me," she said, wrapping his hand. "We don't tolerate bullies. Is that what I am?" "A bully?" Ivy looked up, her violet eyes locking with his dark ones. "To the world. Probably. To her. You're just a giant shadow. Be the light, Charlie. Not the shadow." For a second, the distance between them vanished. Charlie felt a pull, a magnetic urge to lean in to taste the defiance on her lips. Suddenly the kitchen phone rang. The red line. Charlie pulled away instantly, the moment broken. He grabbed the phone. "Vane," he barked. He listened for 3 seconds, his face turning to stone. "Lock the house down," he ordered into the phone. "We're under attack." He looked at Ivy. "Go to Bella's room. Lock the door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice." What's happening?" Ivy asked, panic rising. "My past just caught up with us," Charlie said, pulling a gun from a hidden holster under the kitchen counter. "Run!" The lights in the estate died instantly, plunging the mansion into darkness. The backup generators hummed to life, bathing the hallways in dim red emergency lighting. Ivy sprinted up the stairs, her heart thudding in her throat. She could hear the muffled pop of suppressed gunfire from the front gate. This isn't a debt collector, she thought wildly. This is war. She burst into Bella's room. Bella was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror clutching her teddy bear. "It's okay, sweetie," Ivy whispered, though her voice trembled. "We're going to play a game. Hide and seek. The ultimate level." She grabbed Bella and dragged her toward the closet. It was a walk-in, filled with designer dresses. Ivy pushed the clothes aside and found the hidden panel Charlie had shown her on the tour, a panic room entrance. Crash, glass shattered downstairs, heavy boots thudded on the marble foyer. "Find the girl," a rough voice shouted. Victor said, "She's the weak link." Ivy froze. Victor. The man she had seen arguing with Charlie. She shoved Bella into the small panic space. "Stay there. Don't make a sound," Nobella mouthed, grabbing Ivy's hand. "I have to lock it from the outside to hide the seam," Ivy lied. She knew she couldn't fit in there with Bella without compromising the air supply it was designed for a child. "I'll be right here." She slid the panel shut. It clicked, sealing Bella behind reinforced steel. Ivy backed away, grabbing a heavy brass lamp. She hid behind the velvet curtains near the window. The door to the bedroom was kicked open. 2 men entered. They wore tactical gear and balaclavas. "Check the closet," one commanded. They tore through the room, ripping clothes off hangers. One of them moved toward the panic room panel. He tapped the wall. "Hollow," he grunted. "She's in here." He raised his rifle butt to smash the panel mechanism. "Hey!" Ivy screamed. She leaped from behind the curtains, swinging the lamp with all her strength. It connected with the first man's helmet with a sickening clang. He staggered, but didn't fall. The second man spun around and backhanded her. Ivy flew across the room, crashing into the bookshelf. Pain exploded in her head. "Well, well," the man sneered, looming over her. "The nanny. Victor wants you alive. He thinks you know where Vane keeps the ledger." "I don't know anything." Ivy spat blood trickling from her lip. We'll see. He grabbed her by the hair, dragging her towards the door. Bang! Bang! 2 shots rang out, precise and deafening. The man holding Ivy's hair went limp, a hole in his forehead. The second man turned, raising his weapon, but a 3rd shot took him in the throat. Charlie stood in the doorway. He was covered in drywall dust and blood not his own. He looked like the devil himself. He stepped over the bodies, his eyes scanning the room. Bella Ivy pointed to the wall. Safe. Charlie exhaled a sound of pure relief. He looked at Ivy. She was bruised, bleeding and shaking, but she was alive. He crossed the room in 2 strides and hauled her up. But instead of checking her injuries, he did something unexpected. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her hair. You protected her, he rasped against her ear. You didn't run. I couldn't. Ivy whispered, clinging to his shirt. Charlie Bruno's voice shouted from the hallway. We've cleared the ground floor. It was a hit squad, Cray's men. Charlie pulled back, his eyes hardening into ice. Victor. He thinks you're soft, Ivy said, remembering the intruder's words. He said, Victor thinks I'm the weak link. He's wrong, Charlie said. He touched the bruise forming on her cheek. You're the strongest person in this house. He went to the wall panel and punched in the code. The door slid open. Bella scrambled out, launching herself not at Charlie, but at Ivy. Charlie watched them, his daughter hugging this girl who had known her for 3 days, finding safety in her arms. He made a decision then, a decision that would change the course of the war. Bruno Charlie called out without looking away. Prepare the jet. We're going to the safe house in Tuscany. And the girl, Bruno asked. Charlie looked at Ivy, who was stroking Bella's hair, whispering soothing words. She's not the girl anymore, Charlie said. She's family. But Ivy pulled back, looking at Charlie with fear. I can't leave the country, Charlie. Why? Because Ivy swallowed hard, the secret she had been keeping finally spilling out. Because Leo, my brother, he's with them. The people I owe money to. If I leave, they'll kill him. Charlie went very still. Who do you owe money to, Ivy? She looked down. The loan shark, a man named Silas Thorne. Charlie's eyes widened. Silas Thorne wasn't just a loan shark. He was the chief financial launderer for the Korsakoffs, and he was Victor Cray's cousin. Everything is connected, Charlie muttered. He looked at Ivy, seeing her in a new light. She wasn't just a random encounter in the park. Fate had put her there. We aren't going to Italy, Charlie corrected himself. Where are we going? Ivy asked. Charlie reloaded his gun. We're going to get your brother. The hunt for Leo took them to the rusted underbelly of Chicago's industrial district. Charlie had left Bella at a secure location with his most trusted elderly aunt, a woman who baked cookies with a shotgun on her lap. Now it was just Charlie, Bruno, and Ivy in the SUV. You don't have to do this, Ivy said, wringing her hands. You paid me. I can pay Silas now. Silas doesn't want money anymore. Ivy. Charlie said, checking the clip of his handgun. He wants leverage. He knows you're with me. He'll use Leo to get to me. They pulled up to an abandoned meat packing plant. Thorne Logistics. Stay in the car, Charlie ordered. No, Ivy said, opening her door. He's my brother. I'm coming. Charlie looked at her. He should have ordered Bruno to restrain her. But after seeing her fight that gunman in the nursery, he knew she wouldn't stay put. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "If I say duck, you drop to the floor. Do you understand?" "Yes." They entered the warehouse. It smelled of rust and old blood. In the center of the vast floor, illuminated by a single hanging light bulb, a boy of about 14 was tied to a chair. Leo Ivy screamed, running forward. "Ivy, wait!" Charlie shouted. Lights flooded the room from the catwalks above. Dozens of armed men appeared on the railings. Slow clapping echoed through the space. Victor Cray stepped out from behind a stack of crates, holding a remote detonator. Next to him stood a man with a scarred face, Silas Thorne. "So predictable," Charlie Victor sneered. "The knight in shining armor complex. It always is all your weakness." Charlie didn't flinch. He stood in front of Ivy, shielding her with his body. "Let the boy go, Victor. This is between us." "Oh, it's definitely between us." Victor laughed. "But the boy is insurance. And the girl. She's the cherry on top." Silas stepped forward, grinning at Ivy. "You ran far, little bird, but you forgot the interest on your loan." "I have the money," Ivy yelled. "We don't want your money," Silas spat. "We want Vane's head." Victor raised the detonator. "The building is rigged, Dom. C4 on every pillar. I press this and we all go up. Well, you go up. I'll be in the bunker." "You're insane," Charlie said calmly. "You'll destroy the Syndicate's inventory." "I'll rebuild," Victor screamed, "without you holding me back with your rules and your morals." Charlie looked at the catwalks. He calculated the angles. 20 men. No cover. Impossible odds. He needed a distraction. He looked at Ivy. She was trembling, staring at Leo. "Ivy." Charlie whispered, barely moving his lips. "Do you remember the game you played with Bella?" The one with the loud noises. Ivy looked at him confused. Then realization dawned. The distraction. On my signal, Charlie whispered. 3, 2, 1. Ivy didn't scream. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the flashbang grenade Charlie had given her in the car, just in case. She hadn't known how to use it, but she remembered his 30-second lesson. "Pull the pin. Throw. Close your eyes." She hurled it onto the metal catwalk. Bang! The explosion of light and sound was blinding in the echoey warehouse. The men on the catwalks screamed, clutching their eyes. Charlie moved. He didn't fire at the men. He fired at the chain holding a massive pallet of steel beams, suspended above Victor's head. The chain snapped. Victor looked up just in time to scream before the beams crashed down, crushing the bunker entrance and creating a wall of debris between the gunmen and the hostages. "Get Leo!" Charlie roared, laying down suppressive fire. Ivy sprinted to the chair, fumbling with the ropes. "Leo! Leo! Wake up!" The boy was groggy, beaten. "Ivy." She cut the ropes with a knife Charlie had given her. "Go out the back," Charlie shouted, taking down 2 men who were trying to flank them. They ran. Bullets sparked against the concrete floor around their feet. They burst out the back exit, just as the building shook with a secondary explosion. They dove into the waiting SUV. Bruno floored it, tires screeching as they peeled away from the inferno. In the back seat, Ivy held Leo sobbing. Charlie sat opposite them, reloading his gun, his chest heaving. He looked at Ivy. She was covered in soot, bleeding and crying. And he knew right then that he was in love with her. And that terrified him more than any bullet. The following week was a blur. Leo was sent to a private boarding school in Switzerland, fully paid for by an anonymous benefactor, Charlie. He was safe. But back at the Vane estate, things had changed. Charlie had pulled away. He was cold, distant. He spent his nights in his study, drinking scotch and staring at the fire. He knew that Victor was dead or buried under rubble, but the threat wasn't over. The Korsakoffs would retaliate for the warehouse destruction, and having Ivy and Bella near him was a death sentence for them. He had to cut the cord. He walked into the nursery where Ivy was reading to Bella. Bella was speaking now, small words whispered, but words nonetheless. "Pack your bags, Ivy." Charlie said, his voice flat. Ivy looked up, smiling. "Charlie." "Look, Bella just said, blue." "I said, pack your bags," Charlie repeated louder. "You're done here. The contract is over. Leo is safe. Your debt is paid. Get out." Ivy stood up, the book falling from her lap. "What, Charlie? What are you talking about? I don't need a nanny anymore." Charlie lied, his heart breaking with every word. "And I don't need a stray dog following me around. I have a business to run. You're a distraction." "A distraction?" Ivy's eyes filled with tears. "After everything? After the warehouse, you kissed me in the car." "A mistake," Charlie said coldly. "Adrenaline. Don't read into it." He threw an envelope on the table. "There's $50,000. Severance. Leave now." Bella ran to Charlie, grabbing his leg, crying, screaming. "No, no." Charlie, gently but firmly, peeled her fingers off. He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he would break. "Bruno will drive you to the city," Charlie said, turning his back. "You're a coward," Ivy whispered. The venom in her voice hit him harder than a knife. "You're not protecting us, Charlie. You're just scared of being happy." She grabbed her bag. She didn't take the money. She walked out. Charlie stood in the silent nursery, listening to his daughter sob. He poured himself another drink, his hand shaking. "It's for her own good," he told himself. "I'm a monster. Monsters destroy everything they touch." 3 months passed. Charlie Vane was a ghost. He had dismantled the Korsakoff syndicate with a brutality that shocked even his own men. He was ruthless, efficient, and dead inside. Bella had stopped speaking again. She spent her days staring out the window, waiting. Then the news broke. Charlie was sitting in a restaurant meeting with the city's corrupt mayor when the TV above the bar caught his eye. Breaking news: hostage situation at the city library. A gunman has barricaded himself inside with a group of children and volunteers during a literacy event. Charlie watched, disinterested, until the camera zoomed in on one of the hostages being dragged to the window. It was Ivy. She was working at the library. She hadn't left Chicago. She had stayed working with at-risk kids. The gunman wasn't a random, crazy person. Charlie recognized the tattoo on his neck. It was a Korsakoff enforcer. A remnant of the war Charlie thought he had finished. They weren't there for the library. They were there because they found Ivy. They were using her to call him out. Charlie's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Charlie," a voice rasped. It was Silas Thorne. He had survived the warehouse, though his voice sounded like crushed glass. "We have your little pet. Come alone to the library, or we start throwing children out the window." Charlie stood up. He flipped the table, sending plates crashing. "Bruno," he roared. "Get the car!" He drove like a madman. He didn't care about the police cordon. He rammed the Escalade through the police barricade, screeching to a halt right in front of the library steps. SWAT teams shouted at him to get down. Charlie ignored them. He walked up the steps, unarmed, hands raised. "I'm here," he screamed at the shattered windows. "Let them go." The front doors opened. Silas Thorne stepped out, holding Ivy by the neck, a gun to her temple. "On your knees!" Vain Silas screamed. Charlie dropped to his knees on the concrete. "Let the kids go, Silas. Let her go. You want me." "I want you to watch her die," Silas sneered. "Like I watched my brother die in that warehouse." He cocked the hammer. Ivy locked eyes with Charlie. She wasn't crying. She was mouthing something. Flash. She was reminding him of the flashbang. But they didn't have one. Wait. The news crews. The photographers. Charlie looked at the wall of paparazzi behind the police line. "Now!" Charlie roared. Ivy bit Silas's hand with all her might. At the same moment, Charlie pulled a small remote from his pocket, the trigger for the high-frequency sonic disruptor he had installed in his car for anti-pursuit measures. A piercing, agonizing screech erupted from the Escalade's speakers. It was a sound that shattered glass and brought men to their knees. Silas screamed, clapping his hands to his ears. Charlie moved faster than humanly possible. He launched himself up the stairs, tackling Silas. They tumbled into the lobby. A gunshot went off. Silence. The sonic alarm cut off. The police rushed in. Ivy lay on the floor, gasping. Charlie lay beside her, blood spreading on his white shirt. Ivy crawled over to him. He coughed, gripping her hand. Did I do it right this time, you idiot?" Ivy sobbed, pressing her hands to his chest wound. "You didn't have to get shot." "Drama." Queen Charlie smirked before his eyes rolled back. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing red lights and the deafening wail of sirens. But to Ivy Sullivan, the world had gone completely slunt. The only sound that registered was the ragged, wet breathing of Charlie Vane. He lay strapped to the gurney, his white dress shirt soaked in a terrifying shade of crimson. The paramedic was shouting into a radio, something about BP dropping and multiple gunshot wounds. But Ivy couldn't process the medical jargon. She was holding Charlie's hand, the hand that had pulled her out of the mud, the hand that had shielded her from bullets, and it was growing colder by the second. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice cracking. She squeezed his fingers, praying for a squeeze back. "You promised, Charlie. You said you'd fix this. You can't leave us now." Charlie's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, unfocused, stripping away the layers of the hardened Mafia boss to reveal just a man in pain. He looked at her, his lips moving barely an inch. "Bella," he rasped, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "Bruno has the key." "Don't talk about keys, talk to me." May Ivy sobbed, brushing the hair from his clammy forehead. "Ivy." He breathed out his gaze, locking onto hers with a sudden, terrifying intensity. "Burn it all." Then his eyes rolled back. The heart monitor, which had been beeping a frantic, irregular rhythm, let out a single high-pitched whine. "Beep. We're losing him." "Charge the paddles," the paramedic screamed. The ambulance screeched to a halt at the emergency bay of St. Jude's Hospital. The doors flew open, and a swarm of doctors descended, whisking the gurney away. Ivy tried to run after them, but a pair of massive arms held her back. It was Bruno. The giant bodyguard was covered in soot and blood, his usually stoic face twisted in anguish. "Let me go," Ivy screamed, fighting against his grip. "I have to be with him." You can't. Ivy. Bruno, said his voice thick with emotion. They need room to work. If you go in there, you're just in the way. He dragged her to the waiting room, a sterile white purgatory filled with plastic chairs and old magazines. Bella was there sitting with one of the few trusted guards. The moment she saw Ivy, the little girl launched herself into Ivy's arms, burying her face in Ivy's blood-stained coat. They sat there for 3 hours. 3 hours of torture. Every time the double doors opened, Ivy's heart slammed against her ribs. Finally, a surgeon walked out. He pulled his surgical mask down. He didn't look at Ivy. He looked at Bruno. The doctor shook his head slowly. We did everything we could, the doctor said. Softly. The internal bleeding was too severe. Mr. Vane passed away at 4:02 p.m. The world tilted on its axis. Ivy felt the air leave the room. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just felt a hollow, cold void open up in her chest where her heart used to be. Bruno. The mountain of a man who had survived gang wars and prison slumped against the wall, covering his face with his hands. Charlie Vane was dead. The next 3 days were a nightmare of logistics and grief. The news spread through Chicago like a virus. The king of the underworld had fallen. The Vane estate, once a fortress, felt like a tomb. Ivy walked the hallways like a ghost, packing Bella's things. Without Charlie, they weren't safe here. The vultures were already circling. Victor Cray was dead, and Silas Thorne had been killed in the library shootout, but the vacuum of power was dangerous. A new player had emerged from the shadows. Bethany Cross, a rival crime lord from the South Side, who had been waiting for years to take Charlie's territory. On the morning of the funeral, Bruno found Ivy in the nursery. We have to go to the service, Bruno said. He was wearing a black suit that looked too tight on his muscular frame. It's about respect. Respect, Ivy spat, slamming a suitcase shut. He's dead, Bruno. What does respect matter now? We need to disappear before Bethany Cross decides to finish the job. Charlie left instructions, Bruno said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. He said if this day ever came, you were to follow these exact steps. Ivy took the envelope. It was heavy. Inside was a single key and a hand-written note. Go to the funeral. Stand your ground. Trust Bruno. Wait for the rain. Wait for the rain, Ivy read aloud, confused. She looked at the window. The sky was a bruised purple heavy with storm clouds. Get dressed, Bruno said. We're not running. Not today. The funeral was held at the private Vane family cemetery, a Gothic, sprawling ground on the edge of the city. It was a massive event. Hundreds of people attended, politicians, business tycoons, and hardened criminals in expensive suits. They were there to make sure the lion was truly dead. Ivy stood at the front, holding Bella's hand. They were the only ones crying. Everyone else was whispering, plotting, checking their watches. Bethany Cross stood across the open grave. He was a handsome man, with a cruel smile, wearing a white suit that stood out offensively against the sea of black. He caught Ivy's eye and winked. It was a promise of violence. The priest finished his homily. The ebony casket, draped in black roses, was lowered into the ground. As the first shovel of dirt hit the lid, the sky opened up. A torrential downpour began, cold and biting, just like the day Ivy had met Charlie in the park. Wait for the rain. Most of the mourners scrambled for their umbrellas or ran toward their limousines. Bethany Cross didn't move. He walked over to Ivy, his men flanking him. "My condolences, Miss Sullivan." Bethany smirked, looking down at Bella. "It's a tragedy. But business is business. The Vane territory belongs to the Cross family now, and I believe you're living in my house." Bruno stepped forward, his hand going to his jacket, but 3 of Bethany's men instantly drew their weapons. "Easy, big man." Bethany laughed. "The king is dead. You have no power here." He turned back to Ivy. "You have until midnight to vacate the estate. Leave the girl. The orphanage will take her. We don't want loose ends." Ivy tightened her grip on Bella's hand. Rage, hot and blinding, replaced her grief. "You're not touching her." "I'm afraid you don't have a choice," Bethany sneered. He reached out to grab Bella's arm. Click. The sound was loud, mechanical, and came from everywhere at once. Bethany froze. He looked around. From behind the marble mausoleums, from the tree line, and from the parked limousines, dozens of figures emerged. They weren't police. They were Charlie's most loyal soldiers and men everyone here thought had fled the city. They were armed with assault rifles, and they had Bethany's crew surrounded. "What is this?" Bethany shouted, his voice cracking. "Vane is dead." "Who is commanding you?" A sleek black car that had been parked at the far rear of the cemetery flashed its headlights 3 times. The rear door opened. A man stepped out into the rain. He wore a long black trench coat and held a black umbrella. He walked with a slight limp favoring his left side, but his posture was upright, regal, and terrifying. Bethany Cross went pale. "No. I saw the report. I saw the body." Charlie Vane stopped 10 feet away. He looked pale, and there were bandages visible beneath his collar. But he was alive. "You saw what I wanted you to see," Charlie said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. Ivy gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Charlie." He didn't look at her yet. His eyes were fixed on Bethany. "You came to my daughter's heritage. You threatened my family. And you did it on my grave." "It was a trick." Bethany screamed, backing away. "You faked it. I needed to flush out the rats," Charlie said calmly. "And look at the size of the rat I caught." Charlie nodded to Bruno. "Hard karma." Bethany Bruno growled. Within seconds, Charlie's men descended. Bethany and his crew were disarmed and forced to their knees in the mud. There was no shootout. The display of overwhelming force was enough. "Take them to the warehouse," Charlie ordered. "The police will find them tied up with a full confession of their operations by morning. I'm done with killing, but prison. That's going to last a long time." As Bethany was dragged away screaming curses, Charlie finally turned to Ivy. He dropped the umbrella and walked toward her. The rain soaked him instantly, mixing with the bandages, but he didn't care. Ivy was frozen, torn between relief and fury. You dead?" she stammered, unable to form a sentence. "I mourned you. I told Bella you were gone. I had to." "Ivy," Charlie said, stopping just inches from her. He reached out his hand, trembling slightly to cup her cheek. "Bethany had a mole in the hospital. If I hadn't flatlined, if the death certificate wasn't real, he would have come for you immediately. I had to be dead, so you could survive long enough for me to trap him." "You idiot," Ivy sobbed, and then she slapped him. It wasn't a hard slap, but it was filled with days of heartbreak. Then she threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his neck. "Don't you ever do that again," Don't you dare." Charlie winced in pain, but hugged her back tighter, lifting her slightly off the ground. "I promise, I'm done. The Vane Empire dies today. Bethany thinks he's going to prison, but he's taking the Vane name with him. The police think Charlie Vane is buried in that box." He looked down at Bella. The little girl was staring at him with wide, watery eyes. "Papa," she whispered. It was the first time she had called him that, not Dad or Father. "Papa." Charlie fell to his knees, ignoring the mud ruining his suit. He pulled Bella into the embrace. "I'm here, Princess. I'm not going anywhere." 6 months later, the sun was setting over the rolling hills of Bordeaux, France. The air smelled of grapes and lavender, a sharp contrast to the exhaust and gunpowder of Chicago. Arthur Penhaligon sat on the porch of a rustic farmhouse, watching the sunset. He looked different. He had grown a beard, and the tension that used to live permanently in his shoulders was gone. He was still healing the gunshot wound, occasionally ached when it rained, but he was whole. The screen door opened, and Ivy walked out, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She wore a simple sundress, her hair loose and blowing in the wind. She looked younger, lighter. "The shipment of vines arrived," she said, handing him a glass. "We're officially winemakers. Or we will be in about 3 years. I have patience." "Charlie." Arthur smiled, taking her hand. "I waited a lifetime for this." Suddenly, a shout rang out from the garden. "Mom, Dad! Look!" They both turned. Bella was running through the rows of grapevines, chasing a golden retriever puppy. She was laughing, screaming, and shouting commands at the dog. "He ate my shoe! He's a bad boy!" Bella yelled, her voice clear, loud, and full of joy. Charlie watched her, a lump forming in his throat. The silence was gone. His life was loud now. Loud with laughter, loud with barking dogs, loud with love. "She talks so much now," Charlie joked softly. "Sometimes I miss the quiet." Liar Ivy nudged him. "Yeah, I am," he admitted. He pulled Ivy into his lap. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet, the exact color of Ivy's eyes. He had been a king of a dark kingdom, ruling with fear. But here in this quiet corner of the world, with a woman who taught him how to love, and a daughter who taught him how to listen, he was finally something much more powerful. He was a father. He was a husband. He was free. So Ivy whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "What happens in the sequel?" Charlie kissed the top of her head. "No sequel, Ivy. This is the happily ever after, and we earned it. And that is the incredible, heart-stopping story of Charlie, Ivy, and little Bella. It proves that even the hardest hearts can be softened by kindness, and that sometimes you have to let your old life die to find the one you were meant to live. What a ride. I honestly teared up when Bella called him Papa. What did you think of Charlie's risky plan to fake his death? Was it genius or too cruel to Ivy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story and want more drama, romance, and twists, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're the first to hear our next story. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.